Hello and welcome to The World Now. We'll begin this hour with reports that Brazil is approaching the biggest oil auction in its history. But not everyone in the country is excited. Some citizens went up to the Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro to protest against the environmental impact of the deal. Firms are expected to pay up to $26.5 billion in signing bonuses for fields that Brazil says may hold up to 15 billion barrels of untapped crude. The auction comes as Brazil grapples with a massive oil spill in its northeastern region that has blackened golden beaches. And away from Brazil, Iran will start injecting uranium gas into hundreds of centrifuges at its Fordow facility in the latest step away from the crumbling nuclear deal with world powers since the United States withdrew from the landmark accord last year. In a televised statement on Tuesday, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said the 1,044 machines at the plant will be injected with the uranium gas starting today. The move further complicates the chances of saving the nuclear deal, which European powers have called on Iran to respect. UK Foreign Minister Dominic Raab denounced Tehran's move as a threat to Britain's national security. Under the nuclear deal signed in 2015 by Iran, the US, Britain, France, Germany, China, and Russia, these centrifuges are supposed to spin without gas injection. Tehran has gradually reduced commitments made under the accord, including uranium stockpile and enrichment limits, since being hit with renewed US sanctions last year.
سالون همه در کنار هم نشستن میزها در
And global affairs analyst Jonathan Waschel is joining me on Skype from New York. Many thanks to you, Jonathan, for joining us on this hour. We've seen Iran gradually reduce its commitment to the nuclear deal for a while now. What is the implication of this?
The implications of this is that it's obviously causing a lot of jitters within the international community and those countries that are on the front line of any sort of Iranian aggression vis-a-vis a nuclear weapons program, such as Saudi Arabia, Israel, and other regional countries. This is obviously something that they're very leery of and concerned about. But in terms of the big powers that signed the nuclear accord, with Iran, obviously, this is not going down well, as you mentioned. In terms of a U.S. response, it's certainly not frowned upon very seriously. And, I do not understand how Tehran believes that this strategy, this brinkmanship of kind of stirring the pot, as it were, is going to be helpful in terms of bringing around not just the United States, but even the Western Europeans came out with statements in reaction to this that were quite negative, quite alarmed, and kind of counterproductive to certainly the Iranian government's goal to try to get the Europeans to rally behind them and help them. So it's a rather interesting and complicated approach that Tehran is taking.
All right. Iran is blaming the U.S. for new development. So is Russia. Russia is also blaming the U.S. Do you think that the U.S. is responsible for this move made by Iran?
Certainly pulling out of the accord that the Obama administration negotiated with the other powers of the world is something that was a move by President Trump and the administration to try to do something about an accord that the administration was not happy about. So yes, indeed, this is something that, certainly Russia and Iran would say that the United States started a process of tensions over this. But having said that, the accord itself was flawed. The accord had a sunsetting clause and still does that allows Iran to go back and resume its nuclear weapons dimension to its program that it had, in fact, been conducting and which the IAEA confirmed, and Iran has been firing ballistic missiles that are capable of carrying a nuclear payload, something that has been very alarming, something that even those opposed to the nuclear deal in the first place had pointed out at the time, even before the signing of the accord in 2015. So it's not as if, you know, Iran is this innocent actor receiving the sanctions and pressures from the United States. Iran has been conducting things that are in contravention of the spirit of the accord, which was supposed to bring Iran into a place of, you know, responsibility within the world of nations. And it's not just on the nuclear side and ballistic missile side. Iran's activities within the Middle East, including actual military involvement in propping up Bashar Assad, or what's going on in Yemen with the Houthis, or Lebanon right now, in which you see the Hezbollah proxy of Iran agitating and actually carrying out acts of violence against demonstrators in Lebanon. It's not, you know, it's not so simple, the situation.
All right, like you said the deal is flawed. So some conservatives in the U.S. also say it is flawed. But the U.S. President, Trump, says that he is committed to signing a new deal with, or having talks, you know, on a new deal with Iran. Do you see that happening now with this latest development?
I don't rule that out. I don't see a change in certainly the U.S. government's posture towards Iran. In fact, I would anticipate a clamping down of things, that it would actually be even more harsh, the reaction to this. So this is the Iranians are famous for even said to have invented the game of chess. These are rather interesting maneuvers by the Iranians, and in the short term, it is not going to get them the sanctions relief that they are hoping to get, and sway the U.S. administration into saying, hey, you know what, we didn't mean it with the pulling out of the nuclear accord, we'll come back on board. I think it's going to have the contrarian effect on things. So really, the eyeball should probably be on what the Western Europeans are going to do as a result of this, because what is going to happen, because the
and Jonathan, I was going to go there. I was going to ask you the question, because whilst the U.S. has pulled out of the deal, you still have Germany, you have Russia, you have China, you have Britain still in the deal. So what can these countries do now to ensure that Iran stays within the limits of the deal?
Well, already Iran is outside the limits of the deal, not just because of these centrifuges, but it's brought in more uranium and other activities that are simply not part of the deal. They're already outside the limits of the deal, which has angered the Europeans who signed up to this deal. And from a U.S. perspective, it's proof in the pudding that Iran's intentions are nefarious. Why would Iran go ahead and do this? Now, the Russians, of course, have their own considerations. They've been building nuclear plants within Iran, and they've had some geopolitical strategies, including in Syria, that have been in alignment with Iran. So it's not surprising that they, in fact, have accused the United States of taking illegal measures by pulling out of the accord. But we all have to bear in mind that this accord was not something that the Congress had endorsed. This is something that the Obama administration signed up to. But truth be told, an incoming administration had every right to decide what they want to do about this accord. And in the case of the Trump administration, the decision was taken that this accord was flawed and needs to be renegotiated. Indeed, you're asking the right question about the Europeans. They're in an interesting place. They have to decide whether they're going to do something that'll enable the regime in Iran to survive, because there is obviously a lot of public anger over the current government in Iran, because it's not particularly democratic and because it is autocratic. And at the same time, try to figure out what they want to do, because they feel that the Iran nuclear deal at least had some check on Iranian activities and tried to contain a difficult situation, as Iran was in such a rush to get nuclear weapons a few years back. But the Europeans also are well aware that even the IAEA inspectors are not allowed into military facilities within Iran. So everybody, may talk about the importance of this deal and preserving the deal in Europe, but at the same time, they are aware that, there still could be a pretty robust Iranian militarized nuclear program going on in Iran that nobody knows about.
Global Affairs analyst Jonathan, many thanks for joining us on this hour. All right, coming up on the news, what now? Coming up on the news, protesters demand new elections in Bolivia. They say the vote that guarantees President Evo Morales a fourth time was flawed. That story and more after this break. Stay with us.